Alright, so I finished the line art in the first tutorial, and now we are going to cover flat colors and then shade. And so what I do is I first select outside the layer for all of the line art, and then I inverse the selection, and then I fill it with one color, usually a gray, but sometimes a really saturated color so that it's easy to see what colors I'm drawing next. And then I create a folder and clip it onto the layer that is underneath the whole line art. And then in that folder I create each layer for a different color so that it's very easy to fix if I make a mistake or if I want to change a color. And so for each layer I do, again, I just make each layer, I outline the area I want to be filled, I invert the selection, and then I hit Control F or the fill bucket to fill in that area with whatever color. And Clip Studio Paint is really good about the fill bucket tool, especially if you have an area selected with either the magic wand tool or with the lasso tool, because it already has, if you see when I have something selected, there's a little bar of things that I can choose. It already has the fill bucket available right there, instead of me having to go to the fill bucket tool and then hit fill or hit Control F. I just can click that button and it does the same thing as Control F. And so I get all of the flat colors done. I try to keep few layers just so that it's easier to save. It's less of a huge file, but sometimes you just need to make more than one layer so that you can keep changing things. And then I add some variation to the color. You'll see a little later on. I either take an airbrush and choose a color that is slightly different. I first lock the layer and I choose a color that is slightly different and airbrush in a new layer or a new color so that it has a variation. I do this with every color and I feel like it just gives a better outcome at the end. But instead of the airbrush, usually I actually use the watercolor tool. And so I went ahead and started and completely did the eyes on this one. Usually I save the eyes for last, but I wanted to get a feel for how the rest of the drawing would look by doing the eyes first. And you can see I'm not using the airbrush tool on this one. I'm using a very large watercolor brush, and I'm just blending in the colors. And so now I'm starting on the shadows. And actually Clip Studio Paint crashed on me the first time, so this is actually my second attempt at shading. And so for the hair, I just tend to shade in big clumps, and instead of doing each hair is defined, I just do a few areas that are defined by the shade, and I just start in one area and go down, and it doesn't have to be perfect at this point for me, but it helps. I try to make it as clean as possible at this stage so that I don't have to do too much cleanup later on. And I always work with the direction of the shadow in mind so that I know where the light parts are and where the shaded parts are. And actually the layer that I did for the shadow is a new layer over top of, it's clipped just like the folder with the flat colors is clipped to that first layer. So is the multiply layer, so that it won't go outside of the edges. And so I don't have to do as much cleanup as I would if I didn't use a clipping layer. And a lot of people do the shading part where I had the folder with all the colors on different layers. Some people will shade in that layer, and that is a perfectly good way to do it, and I think it looks pretty good, and it's actually a bit less cleanup than the way I do it, but I just have no patience for it, and it tends to make the file a little big because you're doing so many layers that way that I just don't like doing it that way, and I don't want my Clip Studio Paint to crash any more than it does. And now I am cleaning up, this time with an eraser. When you have the layer on multiply, white is invisible and any other color is visible. So you can use white to do it, but I'm going to lock opacity on it later and airbrush some colors in so it has variety, so I don't want to do white. At this point I just use the eraser and make it so that it's all the right shape. And so I'm just cleaning everything up, because this is the point where if I had made it really clean at first it would have taken a bit less time, but it's all good. And I just clean up, make sure that the shape of everything is all right. And I also like to make it so that it looks good. If I had stopped like at the end of this layer without changing anything, it still would have looked good. And so I think fairly soon I go in with the airbrush. Yeah, first I hit Control U and change the color of the multiply layer to see how it looks in the overall drawing. And I think it looks good, so I go in with the airbrush and start picking colors like reds and stuff. And now I have a new layer, also clipped, that is on Add, and I just take a nice pink and I'm doing the highlights to the hair and to the wood, and I think to her fingers too. Just general highlights, more than I usually do actually, but I think this looks really good. And then I also take, I do another layer, clip that on, and do just a random color on the back edge. I think it's called a backlight, but it adds more of a 3D form to it instead of just it adds more depth to the drawing. And I play around with what layer mode. I don't remember what layer mode I ended it up being. Maybe normal, I don't remember. And I just finish it up. I combine all the layers. I either merge them all or I make a PNG, and then I make new layers, put it on the overlay, and make color adjustments. At this point you can do whatever you want to do, it's just the finish up portion. I also put textures on because they're fun, so you just find a picture with a cool texture and clip it and change it to overlay. Okay, so here's the finished picture. Let me know if you have any questions, if I didn't explain something very well, or if I did something that you don't know what I did. Just please ask, and I will probably be able to explain it better in text than by talking. Thank you!